Live from New Delhi, you're watching DD India News Hour, India's voice to the world. I'm Siddharth Bharadwaj. Coming up in the next hour, Russian President Vladimir Putin to arrive in India on a historic state visit to hold summit with Prime Minister Narendra Modi. The special and privileged strategic partnership set to get a big boost. Fitch raises India GDP growth to 7.4% for financial year 26 over robust private consumption tax reforms. Ukraine peace efforts gain momentum. After Moscow talks, Trump envoys to meet Ukrainian negotiators in Miami. US military activity surges in Puerto Rico even as Venezuelan President Maduro confirms call with Trump, terms the talks respectful and cordial. Second Ashes test gets underway between England and Australia in Brisbane. Visitors aim to bounce back after pulsating defeat at Perth. Russian President Vladimir Putin will arrive in India on Thursday for a high-stakes two-day state visit, his first since 2021. He will join Prime Minister Narendra Modi for the 23rd India-Russia Annual Summit aimed at taking the bilateral partnership to a qualitatively new level. Ahead of the visit, security has been tightened across the capital for this pivotal summit. DD India's Rabindra Chauhan has the details.
Ahead of his high-stake two-day state visit to India, Russian President Vladimir Putin said on Wednesday that Moscow aims to elevate cooperation with India to a qualitatively new level with deeper economic engagement.
We aim to elevate cooperation with the People's Republic of China and the Republic of India to a qualitatively new level by strengthening its technological component. We have numerous joint projects in energy, industry, space, agriculture and other sectors. We will also discuss these topics in detail during the upcoming visit to India with Prime Minister Narendra Modi, including increasing imports of Indian goods to our market.
Cooperation between India and Russia spans various key sectors like defense, trade, energy, nuclear energy, space, science and technology, culture and education. The two-day visit will include bilateral talks and a business forum focused on trade, energy, defense, space and agriculture.
This is the 23rd summit. That means both the sides at every level have invested a great deal of political capital in taking it forward. I still remember that when he had come here in December 2021, at that time, the conflict had not started, but the tensions around Ukraine were going on. And Mr. Putin was on Indian soil for barely 4 hours. But still, he invested that much of time, effort, energy to come, basically to send out a message that this relationship is very important for Russia.
India and Russia share a long-standing trusted partnership elevated to a special and privileged strategic partnership in 2010. This year's summit will review the full range of bilateral cooperation. Defense ties remain an important area in the bilateral relations, with joint R&D and cooperation under Make in India. Both sides also coordinate closely on multilateral forums like the UN, G20, BRICS and SCO. India advocates reform in the SCO, including designating English as an official working language, while SCO regional anti-terrorist structure continues to be crucial in counter-terrorism cooperation. Government-to-government ties remain strong with frequent leader-level meetings and phone calls. Regular ministerial visits reflect sustained momentum in bilateral relations. Putin's visit is being viewed positively across party lines in India, with opposition leaders also welcoming it with optimism. Congress leader Shashi Tharoor said the visit is extremely important.
We talked for a long time about strategic autonomy. We have to preserve our negotiating space. For us, we cannot mortgage our autonomy to any other country's interests. We have to have independent relationships with all these countries. And Russia is an old relationship, it's a serious relationship, it's a strong relationship, and one where obviously we have very many fundamental interests at stake. So I think we will have to see this relationship, how it moves after this visit, but it's a very important visit for our country.
The enthusiasm of President Putin's visit to India is also visible on the artistic landscape. An artist in New Delhi has prepared a portrait of President Putin alongside images of India's present and past prime ministers, symbolic of a strong and enduring friendship between the two countries. Ahead of the high-profile visit, security agencies are on high alert with an extensive security grid deployed across the national capital, covering all routes and engagements. Bureau Report, DD India.
India's Defence Minister Rajnath Singh and his Russian counterpart Andrei Belousov to review the full spectrum of bilateral defence ties, including military and military technical cooperation. Both the leaders will co-chair the 22nd India-Russia Intergovernmental Commission on Military and Military Technical Cooperation in New Delhi. The two ministers will also exchange views on contemporary regional and global issues of mutual interest. A two-day India-Russia Business Forum is slated to kick off in the national capital on December 4 and 5, coinciding with Russian President Vladimir Putin's visit to India. On the first day of the forum, India's Commerce and Industry Minister Piyush Goyal, along with Deputy Chief of Staff of the Presidential Executive Office of the Russian Federation, Maxim Oreshkin, will participate in the forum. The forum will explore various areas of Russian-Indian cooperation, including expanding Indian engineering products in Russia, increasing Russia's purchases of Indian food products, pharmaceutical goods, and collaboration in digital services as the two countries eye to boost their bilateral trade target by 2030. India's Union Minister of Fisheries and Animal Husbandry, Rajiv Ranjan Lalan Singh, held a meeting with Russian Agriculture Minister Oksana Lut to strengthen bilateral cooperation in agriculture, fisheries, animal husbandry and dairy sectors. All right, and DD India's Amritpal Singh joins us live in the story, and also I have Prabhu Dayal, he is former senior diplomat, joins us on the broadcast today. Hello Amrit and hi sir, very warm welcome both of you to DD India News. First to you Amrit, how important is this visit by President Putin, keeping in mind the bilateral ties between both the countries?
Well, it's a very significant visit by President Putin. President Putin, he was here in December 2021, though the two leaders have met outside recently on the sidelines of the SCO in China. This visit is important from the perspective of India-Russia ties, the bilateral ties, which it's a special privileged special strategic partnership which spans the entire gamut of bilateral relations, from defense to energy security, cooperation in civil, energy, space, agriculture, health, tourism, people-to-people ties, trade. During this visit, all that will be up for discussion. About 7 or 8 of his ministers, cabinet ministers, some of them are already here. One of their first deputy prime minister visited the parliament today. The agriculture minister met with the agriculture minister. The defense minister is accompanying President Putin. He'll be holding talks with Defense Minister Rajnath Singh. His interior minister is coming. The head of the central bank of Russia is coming. So, the whole gamut of relationships will be discussed. The ties. There will be a review, a stock taking of where the existing cooperation is going, what needs to be tweaked, what needs to be boosted up. So all that will happen. Also, where do they want to take the relationship forward? For example, they're looking at a plan by boosting bilateral trade to about $100 billion by 2030, deepening more deepening the defense partnership by looking at more joint co-production ventures. Also, looking at civil nuclear energy, they could offer small modular reactors. So all that will be reviewed, the relationship will be reviewed, and a vision will be put forward to a way to take it in the future, Siddharth.
Definitely. Stay with us, Amrit. I would like to go across to Mr. Prabhu Dayal now. Sir, our correspondent Amrit Pal Singh just told us the entire gamut of bilateral ties will be discussed when the two leaders will meet. I want to ask you that how significant, according to you, is this visit by President Putin and, of course, the 23rd India-Russia Annual Summit?
Well, first of all, let me say that Amrit Pal Singh has wonderfully summed up the entire gamut of the India-Russia bilateral relationship. Now, this visit to India by President Putin is highly significant as it aims to reaffirm and strengthen their special and privileged strategic partnership amidst a challenging global geopolitical landscape and also increasing Western pressure on India. Donald Trump's aggressive policies and rhetoric have inadvertently pushed India to reaffirm and strengthen its long-standing strategic ties with Russia. The pressure campaign by the United States has proved to be a self-goal that has reinforced India's resolve to pursue its strategic autonomy. Now, Putin's visit is seen as significant for India's foreign policy. It's a very strong signal of the long-standing and trusted relationship with Russia, even as the United States has imposed tariffs on India over its high tariffs, as he called it, and the continued purchase of Russian oil. Now, this visit is intended to deliver major outcomes and reinforce the relationship. Of course, the two leaders will discuss regional and global developments, including, of course, the Ukraine conflict. Now, let me recall that the Prime Minister had told President Putin that this is not an era of war. So the Prime Minister will underline his views in regard to the global situation, particularly the Ukraine conflict. In addition, of course, there will be the issue of cooperation within international bodies like the United Nations, BRICS, G20, and the Shanghai Cooperation Organization, where both Russia and India are members. Let me mention that Russia supports India's demand for a permanent UNSC seat. So a vision document is expected to be signed, laying out a roadmap for cooperation across various sectors, of course, including defense, trade, shipbuilding, and various other aspects which are important for the bilateral relationship. Now, permit me to mention that defense remains a central pillar of cooperation. And the discussions are expected to focus on critical projects like the joint development of a fifth-generation fighter jet, further S-400 missile deliveries, and of course, the potential production jointly of the S-500 systems. So the leaders are expected to move forward with defense projects, and this is the most important underlying theme of the visit. Let me also mention that very significantly, just ahead of President Putin's visit, the Russian parliament has cleared the reciprocal exchange of logistics support, which is known as the reloss agreement, and which is very important because it's a military logistics pact with India. I also would like to say that apart from defense, there will be a lot of focus on boosting trade and investment, particularly in energy and addressing payment challenges. You know, the sanctions on Russia, which have been imposed by the United States, are posing a challenge in regard to the payments in Western currencies. So there is this question whether India and Russia can make payments in their local currencies or in third currencies. Let me also mention that India and Russia have committed to boosting bilateral trade to a target of $100 billion by 2030. Of course, currently, the trade, bilateral trade is about 68 point some odd billion dollars.
Yeah,
And of that, Indian exports are just about $4.9 billion.
They are less than $5 billion. Definitely,
there
I
is
agree
a
with you.
need to increase Indian exports, and the two sides will discuss modalities how this can be done.
Yeah, definitely. Definitely. Sir, we will discuss in detail about the energy and defense fronts, but let me go across to my correspondent Amrit Pal Singh. Amrit, our esteemed guest has complimented you for your analysis. On that note, I would like to ask you, can you analyze the bilateral trade between both the countries? Because sir has just said that it stands somewhere at 68.7, I beg your pardon, billion US dollars. And India's exports are less than $5 billion. So what's your analysis on that front?
That's very right when he says that apart from defense, the key focus of the because correcting from an Indian point of view would be key. Because there is a huge difference, 5 and close to about 69, 64, 65, 64 point something. And 5 is what we export to them. So correcting that would be a key concern for India, and they could Indians could look at Russian markets, be in engineering products, increasing agriculture and food-based products, exporting them to Russia. Though this figure, when you look at it, the pitch large, but that's mainly because of the oil purchases. So bear in mind. But yes, the fact remains that we import more than we export. So that will be something which the two sides will be talking about. And I don't think there are any differences on that, or there are any reluctances on part of Russia. It's unlike the United States, which is trying to impose tariffs. Here, the Russians would want to collaborate even on labor mobility. They need a talent pool. We've got a huge talent pool. So there are more complementarities and really hurdles or differences. So in that sense, that will be an easy path to walk. But what needs to be really done is that this trade deficit needs to be reduced. And the two sides would be talking this business forum that's happening. It's not just government to government, but also we could see many business to business agreements being signed. Both even as Russia increasingly becomes isolated by the West, Russia is looking out to other countries like China and India and other countries of the global South. So therefore, Russia is also interested in increasing its trade with these countries. So, we could see key focus on trade and investment. Both Indian investments in, say, oil sectors in Russia or the energy sector there, and the Russian investments in India. So that.
All right, definitely. Mr. Prabhu Dayal, I want to ask you that as far as India's exports are concerned, do you see them growing, especially after this summit, in the sectors like pharma, agriculture, food products, and consumer goods as well?
The major items of export from India include pharmaceuticals, organic and inorganic chemicals, iron and steel, and marine products. While the major items of import from Russia include oil and petroleum products, vegetable oil, fertilizers, cooking coal, precious stones, and metals. So there will be a lot of focus on how exports from India could be increased, because it is important from our point of view to bridge the trade gap. And of course, alongside, I also mentioned that we would be talking about how we could be trading in currencies other than the US dollar and European currencies because of the Western sanctions which have been placed on Russia in this regard. Now, in addition, let me take off from a very important point which Amrit Pal was making. And that is that a bilateral mobility agreement is expected to be signed to facilitate legal migration and also the protection of skilled Indian workers in Russia. Russia is facing a labor shortage, and the agreement will aim to establish a formal framework for legal migration and facilitate the expansion of skilled Indian manpower in key Russian economic sectors.
Yeah,
So
yeah.
Russia is keen to attract skilled Indian workers in industries such as construction, textiles, engineering, electronics, and IT. So this pact will offer new employment opportunities for skilled Indian professionals and ensure that they have legal protection
Okay.
and dignified employment in Russia.
Definitely. Very quickly, I want to ask you, sir, that as far as this summit is concerned, what message goes out to the global world?
Well, the message that goes out to the world is that President Putin's visit is a continuation not just of regular high-level exchanges, but it is also driven by mutual strategic interests, the goal of which is to foster a multipolar order. Now, let me mention that a very important message which also goes out
Yeah.
is that the visit is intended to reinforce the special and privileged strategic partnership
Right.
that has been a consistent factor of stability in international relations, and it will allow India to pursue its national interests on the global stage.
Definitely. So you're trying to say that the ties between both the countries, they go beyond diplomacy, is it?
Yes, of course.
Yeah.
The ties beyond diplomacy are evident.
Yeah.
And the visit, therefore, is a test of India's diplomatic skill in balancing its historic friendship with Russia with its evolving global partnerships. And it's going to demonstrate the ability to engage with all major powers on its own pragmatic terms.
All right. With this, thank you so much, sir, for joining in on DD India News Hour, and also Amrit Pal Singh for your wonderful analysis. Thank you so much, both of you gentlemen.
Thank you.
Rising from within the ranks of Russia's intelligence corridors, Vladimir Putin emerged from the post-Soviet transition to become the undisputed leader of Russia for over 2 decades. Watch this special report.
In 25 years, one man has stood at the center of Russian power, Vladimir Putin. His story doesn't begin with power, it began in a cramped community apartment in post-war Leningrad. Born on October 7, 1952, he describes his childhood as ordinary. His father was a war veteran turned factory foreman. His mother, Maria, he remembers as gentle, modest, always keeping the family running with simple food and Sunday baking. He once admitted that as a schoolboy he was more of a hooligan than a model student. But one teacher saw something early: potential, energy, and character. That spark eventually pushed him to study law and then chase the dream of joining the KGB, the main intelligence agency of the Soviet Union. He asked how to get in and was told, first, get a degree. He did. And by 1985, he was serving in East Germany, eventually becoming a lieutenant colonel. By then, he had a family. Putin married in 1983 and has 2 daughters. His political journey began back home in St. Petersburg, handling foreign economic relations. This is where his India connection first formed through rupee debt deals and, as colleagues recall, a growing liking for Indian cuisine. Then came Moscow and a fast rise. In a Russia struggling with political chaos, war in Chechnya, and economic instability, Putin became head of the Federal Security Service, then Prime Minister, and finally on December 31st, 1999, acting President. He won the 2000 and 2004 elections, promising order, stronger pensions, and industrial revival. When term limits forced him out in 2008, he switched roles, becoming the Prime Minister of the country. During this period, the presidential term was extended to 6 years. Putin returned to the presidency in 2012 and again in 2018. His support, according to state polling, surged especially after the 2014 takeover of Crimea. Then came February 2022, when Putin announced what he called a special military operation in Ukraine. Despite Western sanctions, Russia's internal polling still claims high approval for his move. Through these decades, Putin has worked hard to project one consistent theme: stability through big state projects, social support, and long term national plans. And through all of this, India stayed on his radar. He once argued that Russian leaders underestimated India's importance. His first presidential visit led to a strategic partnership with Prime Minister Atal Bihari Vajpayee, now evolved into what both sides call a special and privileged strategic partnership.
India's Union Commerce Minister Piyush Goyal praises the Indian economy as it continues to power on. Minister applauded how the growth is at 8.2% even in the second quarter, beating all estimates despite the global turmoil.
The Indian economy continues to power on. Growth we have just seen is at 8.2% even in the second quarter, beating all estimates. We have seen the lowest ever inflation in the last few months. Foreign exchange reserves continue to be strong. So if I aggregate October and November, both months, there is a growth in merchandise exports, despite all the global turmoil. All the levers of the economy have demonstrated a great deal of positivity.
Fitch Ratings has revised India's GDP growth for FY26 to 7.4%, driven by strong domestic demand and tax reforms. Inflation remains low, giving the RBI room for a possible rate cut. Fitch Ratings revises India's GDP growth forecast for FY26 to 7.4% from 6.9% projected earlier. Private consumer spending, main driver of growth. Increased consumer sentiment and tax reforms also providing support. India's growth expected to ease to 6.4% for FY27. India's inflation is expected to average 1.5% this fiscal, and rupee to strengthen next year to around 87 per dollar. And this certainly goes on to show that how India's GDP is flying high and shining not just in the country but on the global map as well. This is the latest Fitch report that tells it has in fact revised India's GDP growth for FY26 to 7.4%, which is driven by strong domestic demand and tax reforms. And also inflation remains low, giving the RBI room for a possible rate cut. All right, and my colleague Mark Lynn joins us live from the newsroom to talk more on this. Hi, Mark. A very good afternoon to you. Fitch Ratings has revised India's GDP growth for FY26 to 7.4%. What more can you tell us on this, Mark?
Well, this is the result of the huge consumption appetite in the Indian economy. We can see that was unleashed first with the GST reforms, and earlier also, with the government's policies that have put more money in the hands of the consumer. And we did see festival season as well. So that consumption has led to significant growth. And we saw also that our Q2 growth, GDP growth was at 8.2%, which was significantly higher than, about 7% that was expected. So here again, that momentum is likely to be taken forward because that appetite continues in the economy. It's all domestic demand, mind you, not global. So it is domestic demand that is driving this growth within the Indian economy. And as a result, that sort of pull factor is what is going to drive growth from 6.9% to 7.4%. They've revised their forecast because that appetite continues to be good. And prices are reasonably low. So inflation is not at a formidable level.
Definitely. Mark, what's your assessment of India's GDP growth and what factors are driving this growth?
So the growth will continue to be driven by the domestic demand, and also manufacturing has increased as a result of that. Because of the US policies of tariffs, the whole world is in disruption, and most countries are looking towards their own internal resources to try and become more self-reliant. India too has done that, and our exports now have been moving to other parts of the world. So we have seen, I mean, even though the index of industrial production did not show a significant rise this particular month, however, there were different sectors within the IIP that showed that there is growth. And that growth will continue to drive the Indian economy moving forward. We have to see now that there is the MPC, the RBI's Monetary Policy Committee, which is currently sitting. It is meeting, and by tomorrow they will come out with their decision on whether they will reduce interest rates, which are currently the repo rate is at 5.5. They have reduced it by about 100 basis points in the last year. So if they reduce it further, that will leave more money to come into the economy. Now, the important thing is that Fitch has also said that the rupee, which people are worried that is across 90 rupees to the dollar, they say that the rupee is going to strengthen and come to around 87. How will this happen? This will happen because of the growth that they are talking about. Because there is growth, investments will come in. And when there is foreign inflow coming in, then the rupee strengthens. That's basically the way it operates.
All right. Thank you so much, Mark. We leave it there. Finance Minister Nirmala Sitharaman moves the Health Security Say National Security Cess Bill 2025 in Lok Sabha for consideration and passing. The bill proposes to levy a cess on production of goods such as pan masala and other goods that may be notified by the central government. The Central Excise Amendment Bill 2025 has been sent back to Lok Sabha from the Rajya Sabha, that is the upper house, for further consideration and passing. It was passed in Lok Sabha on Wednesday. Meanwhile, during the question hour in Lok Sabha, Electronics and IT Minister Ashwini Vaishnav said that Parliament has enacted the Digital Personal Data Protection Act to protect the personal data of citizens, adding that AI apps and AI models are also covered under the Act. The situation between US President Donald Trump and Venezuelan President Nicolas Maduro is currently defined by an ultimatum, a breakdown of dialogue and a significant escalation of military pressure.
Venezuelan President Nicolas Maduro on Wednesday confirmed he held a respectful and cordial phone call with US President Donald Trump about 10 days ago, framing the conversation as a potential opening for diplomacy. According to reports, Maduro told Trump he was willing to leave Venezuela if he and his family received a full legal amnesty, including the removal of US sanctions and the end of a flagship case before the International Criminal Court. Maduro also said that steps were being taken towards a respectful dialogue between the two countries.
I received a phone call and spoke with President Donald Trump. I can say that the conversation was in a respectful tone, and I can even say it was cordial between the US President and the President of Venezuela. I add that if this call means there are steps towards a respectful dialogue between states, between countries, then welcome dialogue, welcome diplomacy, because we will always seek peace. Welcome diplomats, welcome peace. Peace yes, war never, never in the like.
A group of Democratic and Republican U.S. senators filed a resolution on Wednesday that would block U.S. military action against Venezuela without congressional approval after President Donald Trump said a land campaign would begin shortly. U.S. Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth on Tuesday cited the fog of war in defending the follow-up strike, saying that there were explosions and fire and that he did not see survivors in the water when the second strike was ordered and launched. The U.S. military is ramping up its presence in Puerto Rico, deploying Osprey aircraft, naval ships, and additional personnel as Washington intensifies pressure on Venezuela. Despite the heightened tensions and the U.S. assertion about closing Venezuelan airspace, officials in Caracas confirmed that deportation flights carrying Venezuelan migrants from the U.S. were scheduled to resume. Venezuela's government granted permission for an Immigration and Customs Enforcement flight to land. The Trump administration revoked the temporary protected status previously granted to over 600,000 Venezuelans by the Biden administration, making them vulnerable to deportation. Anamika Pandey's report for DD India.
A flurry of diplomacy, uncertain outcomes. And a conflict entering a critical chapter. After weeks of intensive talks, the path to peace in Ukraine remains clouded in mystery and conflicting messages. The United States, Russia and Ukraine have been locked in high-stakes negotiations, and while officials on all sides insist progress is being made, no one seems willing to say just how close they really are to a breakthrough. More details by Aarti Rana.
Talks were described as reasonably good. The words of the U.S. president hinted at cautious optimism after U.S. envoys Steve Witkoff and Jared Kushner concluded a thorough, productive meeting in Moscow.
I don't know what the Kremlin's doing. I can tell you that they had a reasonably good meeting with President Putin. We're going to find out. It's a war that should have never been started. It's a war, if I were president, we had a rigged election. If I were president, that war would have never happened. It's a terrible thing. But I thought they had a very good meeting yesterday with President Putin. We'll see what happens. He would like to end the war. That was their impression. Now,
on the Russian side, President Vladimir Putin, it seems, has accepted portions of new American proposals, part of a widening effort to halt the more than 2-year conflict. His aides echoed that tone, calling the discussions very useful, constructive, and highly substantive. And yet, even with the praise, a compromise is still elusive. Kremlin spokesman Dmitry Peskov pushed back on reports that Moscow had rejected U.S. proposals outright, suggesting room for continued negotiation. Back in Washington, the U.S. president added that the Russians very strongly want a deal. Meanwhile, U.S. efforts continue to secure peace. White House officials confirm Witkoff and Kushner will meet with Ukrainian envoys in Miami on Thursday. But the talks come at a precarious moment for Kyiv. Ukrainian forces have been losing ground along the eastern front, and a sweeping corruption scandal is shaking the government to its core. President Zelensky's chief of staff, once the lead negotiator with Russia, resigned after investigators searched his home. 2 cabinet ministers have been dismissed, and a former business partner of Zelensky is now under investigation. The final outcome of the meetings is eagerly awaited. Aarti Rana for DD India.
Meanwhile, the Trump administration has ordered increased vetting of applicants for H-1B visas for highly skilled workers, with anyone involved in censorship of free speech considered for rejection. The State Department cable sent to all U.S. missions on December 2nd orders U.S. consular officers to review resumes or LinkedIn profiles of H-1B applicants and family members who would be traveling with them to see if they have worked in areas that include activities such as misinformation, disinformation, content moderation, fact-checking, compliance and online safety, among others. The new vetting requirements apply to both new and repeat applicants. The Trump administration has already significantly tightened its vetting of applicants for student visas, ordering U.S. consular officers to screen for any social media posts that may be hostile towards the United States. As part of his wide-ranging crackdown on immigration, Trump in September imposed new fees on H-1B visas. And Honduras again halted the publication of official results in its presidential election as centrist Salvador Nasrallah maintained a narrow lead ahead of Trump-backed conservative Nasri Asfura. With 79.6% of votes counted, the Liberal Party's Nasrallah held 40.27% of support, less than 16,000 votes ahead of the National Party's Asfura with 39.64%. Rixi Moncada of the ruling leftist Libre Party was well behind in third place with 19.01%. The tightly contested race has been marred by system delays and allegations of fraud, as well as the intervention from U.S. President Donald Trump, who strongly backed Asfura and alleged there had been fraud without providing evidence. French President Emmanuel Macron met Chinese leader Xi Jinping in Beijing on Thursday, seeking stronger commercial ties as the European Union prepares to toughen up its trade rules. A large business delegation is accompanying Macron on his 4th state visit to the world's 2nd largest economy. China is France's 7th largest trading partner, buying around $35 billion in goods each year, according to Chinese customs data. About 10% of those products are cosmetics, with aircraft parts and alcoholic spirits among other key exports. French President Emmanuel Macron lauded Europe and China their role to play in laying alongside other partners the foundations for fair and robust global economic governance.
Europe and China have a role to play in laying, alongside other partners, the foundations for fair and robust global economic governance based on rules and not the law of the strongest. The imbalances that are accumulating today are unsustainable.
C'est durable, c'est-à-dire respectueuse du droit.
Israel has identified the remains of the hostage it received from Hamas on Wednesday as Thai agriculture worker Sutisak Rinthalak, the Prime Minister's office said on Thursday. The body of Israeli police officer Ran Gvili, the last of the living and deceased hostages to be returned, is still in Gaza. The handover of the last hostages' bodies in Gaza would complete a key condition of the initial part of US President Donald Trump's plan to end the conflict in the region. And Dhaka woke up to mild tremors early this morning as an earthquake struck the capital and surrounding areas around 6:15 a.m. According to India's National Centre for Seismology, the quake measured 4.1 on the Richter scale, with its epicenter located in Narsingdi near Dhaka. There were no immediate reports of casualties or damage. Due to the relatively shallow depth, the tremor was felt lightly across nearby districts, briefly rattling households and waking up residents in parts of the capital. Experts have repeatedly warned that Bangladesh remains highly vulnerable to major earthquakes as it lies along 3 active tectonic plate fault lines. Sri Lankan President Anura Kumara Dissanayake has expressed gratitude to Prime Minister Narendra Modi for India's timely assistance following the devastation caused by Cyclone Ditwa, describing the support as a sign of the close and enduring relationship between the two countries. In a social media post, he said, and I quote, "I express my sincere appreciation to Prime Minister Narendra Modi for his message and for India's steadfast support to Sri Lanka following the recent adverse weather. India's prompt assistance under the Sagar Bandhu initiative underscores the depth of our partnership and the enduring goodwill between our nations." President Dissanayike's remarks came as the Indian team's continued relief and rescue efforts on the ground. Another Indian Air Force's C-17 Globemaster aircraft on Wednesday airlifted to Sri Lanka a readily deployable Bailey Bridge, an urgent requirement to restore road connectivity to areas cut off in the wake of severe devastation due to Cyclone Ditwa. This modular bridge can be deployed in hours at locations where existing bridges have been washed off or damaged in the floods, allowing trucks, ambulances and other carrying essential aid to reach. It will help restore road connectivity in areas cut off in the wake of cyclone. The aircraft also brought in 500 water purifiers and 22 personnel, including engineers and doctors, to strengthen the relief efforts, while Indian Air Force's Mi-17 V5 helicopters carried out sustained missions, delivering 9 tons of relief material and rescuing 3 survivors from affected areas. With unwavering commitment, determination and compassion, India's National Disaster Response Force teams continue life-saving operations in Sri Lanka. The teams are on the ground in Badola, working through a painstaking and complex process to retrieve those buried under landslides. Let's now take a look at other stories making news around the world. In Bogota, protesters gathered at Plaza de Lourdes calling for peace and freedom in Venezuela ahead of the December 10 Nobel Peace Prize ceremony. The award this year goes to Venezuelan opposition leader Maria Corina Machado for her fight for democratic rights. Family members Michael Jackson has announced plans for a Michael Jackson Museum in Monaco, showing the late pop star's paintings and personal memorabilia. The opening date and location are still undecided, but Jermaine says the collection is ready and will highlight a lesser-known artistic side of his brother. And still to come on DD News Hour. Australia will impose a social media ban come December 10. FIFA gives a sneak peek of 2026 World Cup draw.
This week on Defense Dynamic, we break down the evolution from S-400 to S-500 and what this leap in air defense technology means for India. high-altitude pseudo-satellites, a first-of-its-kind manufacturing facility, perhaps is now operational. Why is India rethinking its aerospace propulsion roadmap? We explain the shift. This Wednesday at 8 p.m. IST only on DD India.
You're watching DD India News Hour. I'm Siddharth Bharadwaj. And as countries across Europe and Asia are introducing age checks, raising minimum ages and curbing device use in classrooms, and yet there is no consensus on how to balance protection and teen autonomy, Australia will enforce the under-16 social media ban from December 10. Here's more in this report.
Australia is all set to roll out one of the toughest social media age rules in the world. In a first-of-its-kind legislation from December 10th, anyone under 16 in Australia will be blocked from creating or using accounts on major social platforms. That includes Facebook, Instagram, TikTok, Snapchat, and YouTube. Facebook and Instagram began shutting down 500,000 accounts of users under 16 years old on Thursday. Meta also started blocking the creation of new accounts for under 16 users in Australia. Hundreds of thousands of adolescents are expected to be impacted by the ban. As the ban deadline approaches, young people are worried about being cut off from their online safe spaces. But grateful parents aren't complaining.
I think it's a great thing, and I'm glad that the pressure is taken off the parents, because there's so many mental health implications, and to take that off my hands and leave it to the government to decide, give my kids a break from after school and they can just rest and hang out with their family. I think it's a great initiative, a great thing.
Some think the kids might find a way to circumvent the rules.
Many people now, and even before now, have been very attached to social media, and some people use it as like a lifeline for like escaping reality and like entering digital world.
Australia is the first country that has introduced a law aimed at banning under 16s from having social media access.
With one law, we can protect Generation Alpha from being sucked into purgatory by predatory algorithms described by the man who created the feature as behavioural cocaine.
These are surveillance devices. We are commodified. Our data is the currency that fuels these companies today. And there are these powerful, harmful, deceptive design features that even adults are powerless to fight against, like autoplay and endless scroll and snap streaks.
Australia's internet regulator said a teen social media ban would be the first domino to fall in a global push to rein in big tech companies. Globally, nations are struggling to cope with terrible after effects of prolonged use of social media platforms. While looking for a possible solution, many would be keen to follow up the results of an outright ban from Down Under. Anita Raj's report for DD India.
China's export restrictions on rare earth minerals are hurting German manufacturers who say the controls could derail production targets. DW correspondent Chiponda Chimbelu has been following the story and joins us from Berlin. Hi Chiponda, what is the impact of China's rare earth export restrictions on German industry?
Thanks for having me. Well, Germany is struggling with material shortages which are holding back production. And that is according to the IFO Institute, which is a leading economic think tank here in Germany. Now, its latest company survey shows that most of the sectors affected are the ones that rely on semiconductors. And that includes the auto industry and the makers of electrical and optical products. And the situation actually worsened last month. That is when the number of companies saying they have difficulty procuring materials doubled from October. Now, these supply issues could be linked to an ongoing row between Europe and China. In the spring, the Chinese government announced export controls on rare earths, which are used in many electronic components. And since the end of September, there's also been a dispute between Europe and China over the Dutch chip maker Nexperia and its Chinese owner. And Nexperia is a chip supplier to the auto industry.
Okay, and how are European companies coping with this squeeze?
European firms are being forced to explore new supply chains outside of China, and that's also according to the European Union Chamber of Commerce in China, which also says 1 in 3 of its members is looking beyond China for their supply chains because of Beijing's export controls. And there are other bureaucratic challenges in China too. Now, many European companies say that the Chinese Commerce Ministry is now processing export licenses longer than the standard 45 days. So that has also added to uncertainty for European companies that are doing business in China. And for a lot of these firms, production facilities outside China also rely on Chinese parts. Now, that is why some European auto part plants had to suspend their production after Beijing announced export controls for rare earths last April.
You're watching DD News Hour. Time now for some sports news. In South Africa stunned India with a historic run chase to seal the second ODI by 4 wickets in Raipur on Wednesday. India set a massive target of 359 runs after a dominant display of batting prowess by Ruturaj Gaikwad's maiden ODI century and Virat Kohli's 53rd ton. KL Rahul added an unbeaten 66 to round off the innings. In reply, South Africa lost Quinton de Kock early, but Temba Bavuma and Aiden Markram steadied the chase. Markram's 9th ODI century anchored the innings, with Matthew Britske's fluent 68 and Dewald Brevis's half-century provided vital support. In the death overs, Corbin Bosch and Keshav Maharaj produced crucial cameos to seal the chase. The Proteas triumphed by 6 wickets, levelling the series 1-1. The second Ashes test between England and Australia got underway at the Gabba in Brisbane on Thursday, when Stokes opted to bat first after England won the toss in the day-night test at Brisbane's Gabba. England were given early jolts by Mitchell Starc, who removed Ben Duckett and Ollie Pope on duck. However, Zach Crawley along with Joe Root resurrected England's innings. Crawley smashed 76 while Harry Brook was dismissed on 31. Australia already 1-0 up after crushing England in Perth, shocked by leaving out Pat Cummins despite speculation he had recovered from a back injury. All right, and my colleague Narayan Singh is joining us live on this. Hi Narayan, we earlier had a word on this as well. We had a discussion. What would be the cheat code for India this time in the third and final ODI of the series, because the target which they set in the second match was chased by South Africa. It was perhaps some poor bowling performances. What went wrong? Was it the toss, which India lost for the 20th consecutive time? Was it the ground conditions or the poor bowling performance? What's your analysis and what is the cheat code that I just asked?
Siddharth, if you take a look at that match, always when toss is a factor, but we can't blame totally toss. If you are not winning the toss, you will not win the match.
Yeah.
But the way India applied themselves, bowling was a part, as we discussed earlier, that the way the Indian bowlers were not bowling in the right area, despite of the fact that was a dew in the pitch, and because of that the ball was wet and it was slipping. So difficult always when there is a dew and the ball is wet, it's difficult to bowl. But if you take a look what the story after the 34 overs, if you take a look, India scored only 114 in the next 16 over after the 34th over. In the meantime, the same time, the South African team scored more than 148 runs after the 34 over. So we can say the slow scoring rate by the